I have bad news. Are you ready for the bad news? You suck at design. You all suck at design. Raise your hand if you suck at design. Yeah. Okay, raise your hand if you think you're good at design. You suck at design. Except Adam do you suck at design? He's okay. Adam's okay. David probably also doesn't suck at design, neither does Jack. Good news, it's okay. I also suck at design. I do. And I know this, me and you, we're developers. We think we're better at design than we are, but we have tells. We have these little things that we do that make us suck at design. First and foremost is we use random fonts like Roboto, Lato, Open Sans. We never use the one golden font that every good designer uses, which is Inter. If you don't know that and you want to be a good designer, you use Inter. Second thing, this text is so big. What is that? Text 6XL or something? If you want to be a good designer. Oh, we use text base, right? Like if you're like writing a paragraph on your web page, you don't put text sizing, it's base. And then a heading's like text LG and then text XL. We just go up and up and up. Good designers, text SM. Everything text SM. I'm telling you, if you don't know that, you're not gonna be able to unsee this. You go to YouTube, biggest thing on there, text base, then it's text SM. Linear, the biggest thing is like text SM is their logo. Okay, here's a nicely designed little select menu, right? Choose role, perfectly sized. You and me, we would do this. We love a full width input element. They're all full width, and yes. We would take a nice, look at this, radio group, little descriptions. We would take this and we go, you know what that should be? A full width select, right there. No radio groups. We go, look, a little segmented, little tab view. It's great. Nope, full width select. Everything, full width select. If it can be a full width select, it is a full width select. And if you didn't think that you sucked yet, you're gonna think it now. You got your landing page with your features. There's like 5 features. And you're like, what's the logo for each feature? I know, I'll do this. If you've ever used this icon, you suck at design. Okay, we suck, but it's okay because Hugo does not suck at design. Meet Hugo. This is Hugo. He works for Tuple, and he was kind enough to bless us with his incredible design skills, and he worked on Flux with me, and I got schooled, a masterclass in just like so many things, shortcuts I take, things I don't have consideration for. He does, and so thankful for Hugo. Give me a round of applause for Hugo. Thank you, Hugo. I love you, man. When France wakes up, thank you. All right, let's see Flux, right? Come on. Here it is. You ready? This is it. That's Google. Here's my bookmarks. Flux is a UI library for Livewire, an official UI library for Livewire. I've wanted to do it forever. It's been the most requested thing forever, and we finally have it, and I'm so pumped to do it. I've put it off because it's such a huge undertaking, and I didn't want to do it wrong. But now that we have Hugo, we can do it right, and I'm just pumped to show it to you. Let me show you a few just like demos built with Flux. So this is a form. You gotta have a form. Hold the applause, but maybe throw in like an ooh or an ah. Yeah, a nice form. And a Kanban board, because we're all building Kanban boards, right? It's a good demo though. Table, gotta have a table. This is Flux, you're gonna be building this stuff. It's gonna be so sweet. Auth, and then, so this is another Hugoism. He was like, handed me a Figma file with dark mode. And I'm like, the MVP Hugo, like, I'm not gonna do dark mode. And he didn't even like say, he wouldn't even argue for it. He was just like confused. And that was, I feel that was so long ago, I'm a different man. Everything is dark mode, everything. So all your apps, it's the coolest thing because you do something and it looks good and then it just looks good in dark mode. Yeah. All right, so what is Flux? Like that's Flux, but what is it? It is bigger than that. It's a bunch of Blade components basically with a bunch of Tailwind and a little bit of JavaScript, but I wrote it, so you don't have to write it. So you know this kind of thing you have in your app, like X button, those Blade components? I wanted Flux to feel a little differentiated inside of your app, so it's Blade components in every way, except it's Flux button. And the innards of Flux button, the actual blade file, looks like your blade components. I want it to feel like how you would write them with whatever, attributes, slots. We use Tailwind right in line, so you can just edit stuff. And that's that. Okay, so here is Flux. And I just want you to know that this is actually Flux. So this button is the actual Flux button being rendered. You're going to see some stuff that's going to make you think it's not, but it is. So this is the entire slide. I started with like Keynote and other things, but realized all you need for an entire slide presentation is a single Livewire component. So the whole presentation is this one Livewire component called Slides, and it has a property called Slide. And yet, yesterday I'm doing this and I realized this is the first time I've ever built a counter in the wild. Like, this is a counter. It's literally a number that increments and it's useful. So I found the one use case for a counter. All right, yeah. So that's that. And also, like, just to reiterate, everything you see is totally, actually being rendered. Yes, okay. That was supposed to be cooler. Let me make that cooler. Ready? Save. Yeah. Right. View transitions, baby. All right, so let me give you a kind of a 101 tour of Flux and its API, things that you're going to see often. So variants. If there's a variant of a component, we use the word variant. So buttons have a primary variant. Another Hugoism. We suck at design. All our buttons are primary. They're all primary. But like Laravel Cloud, I was one primary button. One. All the rest are this kind of muted button. So we suck, but we made the default not primary. We stressed a lot about like the little top border thing and making it, nice. And we have a danger variant, filled, and ghost. We got icons. For icons, we use heroicons. It is heroic. I asked Adam the other day. It's heroicons. It's not hero icons. This I learned. So yeah, you just go to hero. Whoop, what is that? I don't use ad block. What? Why? Who hacked this thing? So yeah, you go to Heroicons, you search whatever you want, like search, and then they show you the thing, and you just take the name, and we have all these variants, solid, mini, micro, whatever. You can make it trailing. Nope. Ooh, there's one icon that Heroicons doesn't have, and you just saw it, but we added it. It's a loading indicator. So you can just say loading anywhere you're using an icon, and you'll get this animated SVG. Icon trailing, whatever, but this is kind of expresses our intention with Flux is the naming. It's like a name that's easy to remember, icon, and then a modifier, trailing, and we use the word trailing instead of end or left or right or bottom or whatever. Tooltips, easy tooltips, gotta have them. Okay, so this is an input and a button, and something I wanna show you is the sizing. So we can size things down. A lot of times it's bring your own sizing, like an icon, like you size that yourself, Tailwind. But something like this that padding matters with sizing will give you sizes, and we try to make them t-shirt sizes like Tailwind, so it's just base, SM, XS, that kind of thing. So we size these down a little bit, and this is why component libraries are great and why we should use them, because I never used them and I did stupid stuff like you have a bunch of items in a bar, but like one of them has a border and one doesn't, so now it's off by like 2 pixels, and it's just not everything's lined up perfectly. But everything in Flux, here's a badge, everything in Flux is lined up perfectly. So if you have like a badge with no border and then a button with a border, whatever, like all of them, if they're a SM or XS, whatever it is, a select drop-down, tabs, it's all gonna be the exact same height, and you can just rely on that. Okay, so those are things that you're gonna find in a lot of component libraries, but the things I'm most excited about are things you don't. Things that were just born out of me using Flux and going, oh, this is kind of annoying, how could we solve that problem? And just originally happened. So picture this, you got like a web mobile thing with a little sidebar toggle there, that button, and it all lines up great, right? Like you have that line right there, it's perfect, but then Hugo says we need to make that a ghost button. So you say variant ghost, but now it's inset. So your eye is like, it's a little weird, that line just moved. So what do? How do you fix that? You can add some negative margin, but it feels like a hack. And it's like very specific. It's like, oh, I'm gonna hard code this specific margin, but what if I use a different icon? What if this changes? What if the sizing changes? So in anything that is ghostly, meaning it has like a visual surface area and then a true surface area if you hover or something, we offer the inset prop. So you can say inset left, and now it just adjusts for its own internal padding. And this inset prop exists with, again, anything that it should, like a badge. I don't know if you saw that, I added this badge and the whole line just like adjusted, you know? Because the badge isn't just text, it has padding. So you can add inset top and bottom, and it'll compensate for its own padding and just render perfectly in line. So you're gonna use inset all the time, I promise. Woo! All right, and you'll see it in the, like this is just the stripe dashboard. And there it is, like that same pattern where that's a hover state. They offset things so that visually it's, you know, aligned. All right, so let's talk about forms. That's 101, this is 102. Flux field, all forms start with fields. This is the field component, and you can build up your field. So Flux field, and then input, you add a label at the top, description below it, and then an error below that. And we use this full sort of, this is Flux's philosophy when it comes to composability, is like give you the individual components so that you can build up what you need. If you need some extra treatment, designer word, treatment. We don't say treatment because we suck, but designers, they all say treatment all the time. So if you want some sort of different treatment, you can just do it because you have the thing. You're not adding like 10 extra props to the input element or input component. And another cool thing that we do is a lot of components don't have margin, but they have margin if they should, like if they're relative to each other. So a lot of it's like CSS sibling selectors. So if the label and then description are together, there'll be a specific margin. If you move the description, check this out, you just move the description and then it adjusts all the margin automatically. So you can just adjust things by moving the elements. All right, so that's cool, but that's 6 lines for an input with a label. And you do that all the time. You got 10 input fields in your form. Is that 60 lines of code plus a bunch of extra stuff? It's visually a lot. So another like philosophical thing with Flux is to have this composability at your fingertips for when you want it, but then like go from here all the way to here. Not this middle liminal space where there's props flying everywhere. It's like really ugly and big and gross, and then really tiny and really clean. So that's what we have. It's a shortcut for all that stuff. You add label or description to any input form element, and internally it'll wrap itself in all of those elements. And then of course you can always just drop back down and do it yourself. All right, so that's an input element, a field. You can add a badge to it. This is a phone input, and right now it accepts whatever you want to put in it. Whoops. But like you might want to put some masking, some input masking in it, so we offer input masking. You just say mask, and now you type in, and it's limited to what you type in. Yep, can't type letters, but you can type numbers. So yeah, input masking comes out of the box, and this is a point I want to make, is a lot of these component libraries, on the surface, they have clean APIs, and they look visually clean, but under the hood, they're cobbling many, many other libraries together. And so what you end up with is this massive JavaScript build, and it's not cohesive. Everything, we have one dependency, floating UI, we'll talk about that later, that we can get rid of, but everything else is hand done. So real quick, yesterday, I was like, Googled like most popular input masking package in JavaScript, went to unpackage, and this is the code that you would get if you just took someone else's input masking code. This is straight up. I'm not gonna like, name names, don't look at that URL. I'm not trying to throw shade. But this is a lot for input masking. This is Alpine's input mask plugin that's been in production for like 2 years and it works great. That's the code right there, bam. So which one do you want? So this results in Flux being custom, tailor-made at every level. And it just feels like solid and lightweight. Okay, so this is an input field with a little icon. If you wanted to make this clearable, so let's say this is a search, you want to make it clearable, you add icon trailing, X mark, whatever, you can't click it, right? So this is a cool pattern you probably heard me talk about, but these props that just accept strings for the happy path, a lot of them can just be used as slots in a blade component. So in this case, if you want to instead take the slot of icon trailing, get the positioning, and then use your own button, you can just do slot name icon trailing and put your own button in there, and then attach all your input, all your click listeners, and it just works. All right, so that's that, but we also, so there's like 3 times I ever need to do that. Let's just give them to you. So this is clearable. You just say clearable on an input, and I don't want to start that. You get clearable on an input, and then you can just clear it. We also have viewable for password inputs, and you get that button right there, and you can view it. Viewable. But wait, copyable. Pretty sweet. All right, so yeah, we got this search thing. Let's actually make it work. We have autocomplete in Flux. So we can just say whatever, start typing, hit enter, and get that good autocomplete. Whoops. And that's what it looks like. It's yeah, autocomplete. Autocomplete, first child is a regular input, put whatever you want in there. This is another thing you'll see a lot. I try my best to avoid autocomplete, autocomplete.trigger, autocomplete.input, autocomplete.panel, blah, blah, blah. It's like, try to keep things as composable and minimal as possible. All right, this is a checkbox group. You can add descriptions, you can make it a radio group, you can make it a switch group, and all these things, you don't have to wire up all that, Tailwind and styling yourself. There's defaults with the label prop and whatever, and then of course you can customize however you want to with the full field API. Okay, let's talk about this checkbox group. This is another one of those, whatever. I don't want to say it's an innovation. I don't want to use that word, but it is something that I haven't seen that I was like, this is the way the web should work. You're working with a checkbox group, and honestly, like to a browser, each checkbox is its own form control, right? But to me and you, we have like an array, and we're binding that array to each item in this checkbox, which is annoying. And then you have like, what's the syntax? Is it like wire model or v model or whatever, like the array dot star or dot, like whatever. So you should be able to wire model directly to the checkbox group. So we have that. You can just wire model to a checkbox group, and now all the data will bind directly to the group, and you don't have to do all that finagling. Okay, and so let's like look at this checkbox group for a second. Like what's going on under the hood? I'm going to show you the actual blade component for checkbox group. Is that it? Yeah, okay. So this is it. This is the full blade component, the full source for checkbox group. At the top, you'll see this a lot in Flux. Every one of them has this. PHP, I do a little class builder thing. It just concatenates strings. It just looks kind of nice. And then right there, that with field, that's what handles all that pass label in and then turn it into a field. So it's just a little wrapper. And then UI checkbox group. So this is weird, but like what is that? You might expect, okay, he's doing some custom things with wire model. There's inline Alpine, maybe there's entangle or modelable or whatever, or just a bunch of inline JavaScript. And it's not that way. So for Flux, in Flux we ship a JavaScript core that gives you all of these custom web elements. I don't know if you're familiar with custom web elements, or raise your hand if you've ever heard of like web components or custom web elements. Okay, so that's what these are. The browser sort of treats them and initializes them as actual elements. And so I realized, like, this is the story for Flux. This is what it should be, is we'll ship to you the missing web primitives, the elements that should be in a browser that aren't, and you can just use them in your Flux code, and you don't have to maintain all the JavaScript. We'll maintain the JavaScript, you throw on the Tailwind classes and do whatever you want with it. So that checkbox group, let me show you inside DevTools for a second. If I take a look at checkbox group, okay, so this is it. Yeah, there's UI field, there's UI everything. So UI checkbox group does so much heavy lifting, ARIA attributes, whatever. Wire model is directly on it because it works just like any other input element. Here's literally the actual element like in JavaScript memory. And you can just say like value equals email and hit enter, and then the value turns into that. You can get the value. You can get and set the value. It fires input events. It works. It's actually like kind of framework agnostic. So that's Flux's JavaScript core that I'm going to oogle over and tell you a lot about because I love it just as much as everything else in Flux. Okay. I already showed you the code. Thanks for the prompt. Here's a good one. Check all. You just throw input or checkbox check all, and now you can control that checkbox group with check all. And if you've ever tried to do this, it's like, okay, big deal. It's one checkbox that just checks the other ones. No, no, no. You have to be able to like control it with those checkboxes in indeterminate states and go to empty and go back to full. And it's not simple, but because we have that core, it's simple for you. So there you go. I forgot to, all right. Rows, text box, or text area, silly thing. Sizing, you size text areas with rows, right? And then you put a bunch of them in there, and you want it to be bigger, like you want it to expand automatically. This is not easy. It's really weird. You have to do complicated things, like have a mirrored div that's hidden that has the same content to get the height, to set the height. Really weird. But CSS has this new thing called, I think, field sizing. So you just say rows auto, and now you have auto sizing text area. I did nothing for that, so maybe don't clap. That's CSS. Give it up for CSS. Okay, this is a bunch of components I thought were lame and we shouldn't add because bring your own Tailwind. Like, you know divs, you know that stuff. Why do we need heading, subheading, text, links, separator, spacer? Those are They just didn't seem like they pulled their weight. But now, these types of things are the things I love most about Flux and I use the most. And they're kind of the most compelling case for a component library, these little tools in your tool belt. So heading and subheading, simple. They space themselves right. They have dark modes. You don't have to set those colors yourself. And there's two extra sizes, which is a constraint. It's a nice constraint. After converting all of Hugo's Figma files and sort of realizing that, oh, he's very limited in the sizes that he uses and the colors that he uses. So let's standardize those into components so that you inherit those opinions and your apps start to look a little more well-formed, a little less chaotic. But we got texts, we got link, stuff. All right, separator. Separator is big deal. It's a div. It's a div with a border or a background. But did you add role separator and orientation horizontal or whatever? No. And when you do your vertical separator, how do you do that? Is it height full? But in Flex, that doesn't work. So is it item stretch? But then if I use item stretch and I use it outside of Flex, it doesn't work. So this is one of those, you try to build a separator, it's just harder than you want it to be, but we did it. You can make it slimmer with MY2. Bring your own tailwind, just make it slimmer with some margin, and you can add text to it with TextDoor. Yep. Separator. Yeah. Variant subtle. Variant subtle. Not clapping for that. All right, this is like a nav bar. You got two things, one on the left, one on the right. Flex, justify between, of course. But you want to add a notification bell. Now we got to put a wrapping div with flex whatever between those two, and then we got to have the same gap that we had for the parent, and now things are nested and I don't like them. This is something that I have fallen in love with, spacer. You just add spacer and it shoves its flex arms out and pushes stuff. And it's awesome. And you're gonna love spacer. Trust me. All right, layouts. Another thing I didn't think I was gonna tackle. And layouts are a stressful thing, for anyone. It's the kind of thing, is this how you feel about layouts? I never want to touch them. We got it, don't touch it. Don't add anything to it, leave it alone. So that was my main goal with this is how do I build something that makes me not feel that way about my layout? How do I build something that makes me feel empowered to actually change stuff, that I could understand how these things work and move? Prepare yourself. So I ended up going to every app I could, took screenshots of 30 apps, and I'm trying to find the patterns. Okay, there's a full width header on this one, the other one's got a full height sidebar, and these items are stretched here, and this is that, and constructing a unified field theory of layouts, and I think we got it. We'll see. You got Flux page and Flux body, and this code block is rendered fully inside of Flux body. Just a reminder, it's real Flux. All of this is real Flux. So that's actually in Flux body. You add a header, Flux header, right? The color, you have to add that yourself. It's bring your own tailwind for those kinds of styles, because you want to do your own color. And all right, we're just going to fill it out a little bit. And I'm just going to flash to you things. Flux brand, Flux nav bar with nav items and icons and href, and it auto detects the current thing, so you don't have to do request is 10 times all over the little thing. A lot of stuff, whatever. Separator, drop down, spacer. Love the spacer. Yep. All right, we're going to contract that down, and container. If you want it to not be full width, you add container to header and it just does that. If you want that on the body, you add container and it does that. Or you can do it on one and not whatever you want. Okay, let's simplify so I made this longer. So if the page scrolls, the header scrolls too. If you want a sticky header, this is actually easy now with CSS. There's position sticky. But it's not easy because you have to use top and then a hard-coded value. So you have to know the exact height of the header. Has anybody struggled with that? Sticky? It's not, you want it to be easy, right? It's not easy. 4 other people agree with me, it's not easy. You add sticky, and then you just get sticky. And it auto-calculates the height for it, and it just does it. Sticky. All right. Let's simplify this down and look at sidebars. You want a sidebar? There's your sidebar. You add sidebar. Style it yourself. Let's fill it out. All right, same deal. Another thing, again, it's not layout.sidebar.brand. Layout.sidebar.navbar.item.dropdown. Whatever. It's no. Sidebar, brand, input, nav list. Yeah, so you get that stuff. But check this out. It's like the other stuff's way at the bottom. You don't want that, right? What do? Sticky, what's up? Sticky. That's awesome. Okay, so yeah, that one. If you want the sidebar to be full height, right? I was talking about like half the people do that, the other half do this. How do I give you an API to do that? Is it a wrapping thing? Is it a prop called full width that just feels kind of annoying? What is it? I thought about this and I realized we have CSS sibling selectors that allow you to detect the order of things in the markup, and we use CSS grid for the layout. So it's like header, sidebar, body, aside for a right sidebar, and footer. You didn't see those, but whatever. And if you want the header to be the main thing that's full width, you put header at the top. If you want the sidebar to be full height, you just switch the order, and then they switch. And I think that's cool. All right, stashable. You didn't see that, and you didn't see that. If we do this, it didn't stash. You're on mobile. You want it to stash. One quick thing, shout out to Hugo. He doesn't suck at design, so he does stuff like this. In mobile, all these click targets are bigger for our little meat fingers. When it's desktop, it's like slimmer and sleeker, but then you go mobile and touch targets are bigger and more accessible. But yeah, you want this to stash, right? So no problem, add stashable, and now when you do that, it stashes automatically. And what about like toggling? You need those toggle buttons. This is another thing. It's like, all right, should we add 5 more props about toggling? Should we do it automatically? Just add the little toggle buttons? No. Just give you some components and you put them there. You choose the icon, you put them wherever you want, and now the toggles will show up. And of course, you got your inset. So there you go. You got stashable sidebars, toggleable stuff, sticky stuff. Do you feel like we solved layouts? Anybody? One person? Yeah! I feel good about, like, honestly, I would use Flux in an app, like just this part. Like, just even the doc site I used it for, and I'm like, oh, sick. You get all the sticky everything, and it's awesome. All right, yeah, sticky everything. So, okay, tabs. Tabs are simple. How do you build tabs? Xshow or vShow, a button that toggles a value, you know, and you just check like if that value is that value. Well, here's the thing. Like a lot of these things, tabs are not tabs. There's tabs and then there's tabs. The tabs have a big document by the W3 something, consortium something, ARIA something, that has a big giant prescription of all of these attributes that you need to have and all of this keyboard behavior, and it's not simple, and it's a huge waste of human effort for everybody to build this themselves. So we do all that. So the tabs component, let me show you a concept called roving tab index. This is a concept that you see in a lot of these types of components, where if you have 20 tabs and a user is using only their keyboard or a screen reader, you don't want them to have to tab through, I'm so sorry, this is the same word. You have to tab through 20 tabs. That's annoying. So what you're supposed to do is make it so that you tab, only the active tab is in the tab order. So if I tab around it, it's only that. And then I use my arrow keys to navigate the tabs, and what's tabbable switches. That's called a roving tab index. And everything in Flux that should have one, like menus, list boxes, all of them have roving tab index. Roving tab index. Give it up for something you probably didn't maybe not know or care about, but is actually like the right way to do it. We did it. And then also, like, of course, the web's missing primitives. Why doesn't the browser have a tab element? But we have it now, UI tabs and UI tab group, and it does all the stuff. Roll tab list, tab index 0, ARIA selected true, ARIA controls and assigns a random ID. All these things you're just getting. You're massively leveling up the accessibility of your apps for keyboards and screen readers. Just by using Flux, you just get it. All right, yeah. Tab group, this is a fun one. You can, I don't know, it's fun to me. You can use a tab group without all the panels, and it's like still right. There's roll tab list. So you can just do that and then control it however you want. So you could add wire model, it's wire modelable, and then have access to that. And then like a multi-step form, now you can control what the contents are and still have a nice tab list with all the stuff. Variant segmented, nice little variant. I use it now just as much as the normal variant. And here's a little design detail. So the background of this is slightly transparent, or majorly transparent, for good reason. What we started with was hard-coded colors because they look better. You can control them better. But Flux is like a more like generalized thing. I don't want to restrict you to using a white background for things to look good. You want to be able to use any background. So the top is what we have. The bottom is what we used to have, but now everything in Flux that we can do this to, we did do this to. So if you change the background, it won't get washed out. It won't just disappear. Yeah, and it works with dark mode. Yeah. Little touches that aren't on my radar, and then Hugo shows me and I go, that's great and obvious. Thank you, Hugo. All right, here's another little one. You look at these are both 40 pixels because we make sure that everything is the same pixels if you're going to put them in a bar. It's 40 pixels. But you look at this, and the right one looks smaller because it's got like, it's like inset a little bit. So we also do optical alignment. So optically, they're not the same height, but like technically they are. So we just adjust it. Get ready, big reveal coming, big reveal. Yeah. Did you see it? Yeah. I'm going to do that again. There it is. Pretty beautiful. And it doesn't take up more space. We use negative margin. It just expands visually. Okay. So my quest. So that's the easy stuff. My quest, I know. My quest for the past 7 years, it's not been making web development easier for people or whatever. It's not a noble quest. It's an embarrassing quest. Truly, the arc of my career has been trying to build a drop-down menu, like the whole time. That is literally encapsulates the struggle is building a drop-down menu. And it is so deflating. I worked on Flux so hard, and I had an aunt and uncle over who said, let me see what you're working on. Oh, all right, I'll show you. Here it is. Doink. And they're just this look of just like, what? Why? You spent, how? And then no, trust me. This is the hardest thing in web development. Like, I swear, it's so hard. And okay, that's literally, yeah. So that's the quest I've been on. I wrote an entire JavaScript framework to make dropdowns easier. For real, it's called Alpine.js. This is the homepage, a drop-down menu. It's not a drop-down menu. People have told me it's not. This is the Alpine homepage drop-down menu. It drops down, but it does nothing else. You can't click away. You can't hit escape. It has nothing, aria, anything. It's not a drop-down menu. So okay, and this isn't a dig on Alpine. Every framework's like this. You have to do it all yourself, right? So you can do it all yourself. You can add a ton of stuff. Key down this, aria that, and then you get something that kind of works, escape, whatever, but you put so much effort into this. You read up on all the stuff, and then you met position relative and overflow hidden. These two things together will destroy your beautiful drop-down menu every time, no matter how hard you try, no matter how high your z-index is, you cannot escape the gravity of position relative and overflow hidden. And it hurts. It hurts us, the working man, who's not using React and isn't portaling everything everywhere with like a whole new rendering layer and whatever. It's like we're just simple folk with HTML trying to make a living, right? But we've prayed and our prayers have been answered. The browser gods have delivered to us Popover. Clap for Popover. This is honestly like the coolest thing to come to browsers in a good long while. I'm so stoked about it. You add a button, Popover target, and then something with Popover, and watch this. It's still, you see the orange thing? It still has the overflow. Bam! It goes outside of it. It's so, you guys are like, but that doesn't look right. Yeah, we'll just skip that for a second. So what's happening here with this popover, it's escaping the overflow hidden because popover is rendered in the top layer. If you open up the dev tools, it's on an entirely new rendering level that's above z-index entirely. This rendering layer was only reserved for like full screen video so that your popovers didn't show up in front of it. But now we have access to it with popover and with dialog. But what you saw, oh, and it's got like all the stuff you want. Click away, escape, only one open at a time, nesting works great, it's awesome. You can focus in and then escape out and it'll return focus to what was focused before. It's awesome, but it's not positioned at all because you can't position it relative to anything because it's in the top layer, it has no idea. So you have to use a library like Floating UI. It's the new Popper.js, it's our one dependency and they're awesome. So thank you Floating UI. Let me show you briefly. We're going to come back to that in a second. So you could do this yourself. You could do it. But we added a few, nice wrappers. So you have Flux Dropdown, and then the first child is a button, any button. Just has to be a button element. And the second child is anything with popover. And then you have a drop-down menu that anchors and does all this stuff. Quick little, Just get it out, all right, so we got position. You position it however you want, and this is all using floating UI, and floating UI takes care of, so CSS is gonna get anchor positioning. Probably by next year, we'll just be able to use CSS to do this part. But yeah, if it's about to go off the page, it'll automatically put it on the other side, so you're never gonna overflow. It's really smart. It's a great library. Yeah, woo. All right, so that's a drop-down, but it's not a drop-down menu. This is why I said I was gonna do a whole talk about hamburgers or whatever, hot dogs and drop-down menus. So it's not a drop-down menu. It's not a system menu. So remember, you pull up the big, the scroll of ARIA, what to do for what, and there's this thing called role menu for system menus. If you go to this top bar, this is a system menu in the OS. You can use the arrow keys. You can hit like R, and it'll go down to the next thing that starts with R. It has a lot there for you that a normal like navigation popover with A tags doesn't have. So when you're using a system menu on the web and you want like an edit and a delete and a view button, we give energy saver turned on. Thank you. Energy conscious. So I hit next, and now we have Flux menu. So I'm also pumped about this because it's composable. It's not, again, dropdown.wrapper, dropdown.trigger, dropdown.button, dropdown.panel, dropdown.overlay. It's like dropdown, button, menu. And this menu does all those things. You have arrow navigation. Focus is roving in here, but you can't see it. I can hit B and it'll go to bar. Escape, it'll focus back, all those things. We have checkboxes. You can have menu item checkbox. And radio groups in your dropdowns that you can easily wire model bind to. And it's not hacky. There's role menu item checkbox and role menu item radio in the HTML. This is a full dropdown. They go wild. Honestly, this is the part where I abandoned what I was doing and started out a whole new course with all the new JavaScript stuff with those components because I needed submenus and checkboxes and all this stuff. And it was like, a lot of libraries don't offer this stuff because it's hard, but we do. So you got everything you need in a drop-down menu. Submenus, clickable submenu thingies. You could have 20 levels deep submenus, although you're not supposed to. And it's menu item, separator, submenu, radio group, radio, whatever. Lot of drop-down stuff. Are you impressed by the drop-down? Okay, because my uncle and aunt were not impressed. All right, so that Flux menu, you can just, instead of wrapping it in drop-down, you can wrap it in context and then have some clickable target. Now it's a context menu. So the same exact menu, and you can just right-click, and then you get a context menu. Context menu. All right, well, you're all pumped and warmed up. This is the final thing that I wanted to add to drop-downs, and I'm stoked about it. If you go here and you go to this sub-menu, oh, this is so stressful. I'm sweating with my jittery talk hands. How do I get over here? You want to just be able to whomp over there, and it works. We have safe areas. So they're rendered. You don't normally see them, but I threw some CSS on them, and now we have safe areas. If you pause in the middle, they'll drop down. What do you think? Yeah. Now does it add a little bit of perspective when I'm like, look at this drop-down menu? And they're like, what? All right, modals, we got those. We use the dialog element for modals. It's in browsers now, and it's awesome for a bunch of reasons. But here's a basic modal. You have modal, you give it a name, and you have modal trigger. And I'm doing this kind of separate thing because you don't always want to nest the trigger inside the modal. You might want to share a modal or whatever. So we click this, you get the modal. It looks great. And again, it's only a dialog element. And you get a lot for free with this. A lot of accessibility stuff, a lot of tab behavior. But one of my favorite things about it is that it's a single element for the modal. If you make your own modals, you know that there's an element for the backdrop, an element for generally the wrapper, and then an element for like the panel, and it's just elements on elements. So if you wrap it inside a blade component like this modal, and you want to add a class like change the border radius, it's like, how do we know which element to put that border radius on? It's difficult. So, do we give them 3 components they have? No, it's one element. And I just love it because it's so clean and simple. It's literally somewhere it is. If you open it and then look at it, This is dialogue. So that is the entire element. The border radius is on it, the shadow's on it, and whatever. I like it. All right, there's a variant called flyout. Just a bunch of styling differences. You can nest them. Yeah. Yep. So sweet. Most of that clap is for dialogue element, honestly. That was like probably the easiest component of all these, like easier than even stuff that you would think should be easy. So this is select. Gotta have selects, right? And they gotta be full width. Full width by default, baby. select option, you know, basic stuff, whatever. But the number one thing that I have been requested, of course, everybody's like, how do you select to in Livewire? And I'm always like, okay, I could show you. And again, this is one of those things. It's like, are we gonna wrap up one of these like 800 kilobyte JavaScript libraries for a select menu that doesn't work half the time for certain things? And you know, and like, no, we're not gonna do that. So we have custom selects in Flux, and they are handwritten at every level, and I am so stoked about the custom select. You add custom to select, and you get select trigger, options, and option. And now these are just elements. You can style them however you want. So if I click this, it looks like a select, but it's custom. You may have heard it called like a list box or something. But there's like naming a select is brutal. Like combo box, pill box, select multiple, custom select. It's like, what do you call it? So it's just select. And if it's your own custom thing, it's custom. And thank you, D. Cole and Chris Morrell. We had an emergency call on Friday for hours to figure out the best naming for the APIs. So yeah, so it's styling. You can like add stuff like styling and make it whatever. You could add avatars and style it however you want. Let me show you some other stuff. So if you want to make this is really rad. Check this out. You add searchable, bam, now it's searchable. Yeah. You want it multi-searchable? Multiple. Done. Yeah, get it going again while I'm typing. Nobody clapped? Where's my crew? I had an agreement. Okay. So yeah, and now you want like a pill box or something. You just say pills. You say spills. Pills, and now you got pill box, searchable, pill box. And all of this is not rigid. It is composable. You could change pills. You could make your own component. It's so flexible. There's UI combo box under the hood that has like very specific thing. It's super, super flexible and composable. It's just a button element. Literally, trigger, this trigger could be anything. Like if I put like button, trigger, why, that's not a thing, what? Trigger, and I think, yeah, okay, hit save, and there you go. So now you have a not full width, but you know, I know you wanted it to be full width. But yeah, it's just a button. It's that first child trigger, second child target pattern that I've fallen in love with. So that's selects. I don't know, they're great. All right, you can expand that. Same combo box element under the hood, but now you got, you know, command palettes. Let's soup it up. This is the command. Command input, command items, bunch of items. You go, bam, let's add some icons, add some keyboard hints, put it in a modal, put a modal trigger, get a shortcut key to trigger that modal, get an input, render it as a button, give it an icon, give it some keyboard hints, and now you got a sick command palette that you can like search and, yeah, add wire click, generate this stuff from the server, like, you know, do whatever you want. Like this is huge stuff that I wanted to nail, and all of it is handwritten. Yeah, all that JS, right? Like you have chosen, select to, some input masking library. This thing is megabytes of JavaScript. You go to these other component libraries, megabytes of other people's JavaScript. This is our JavaScript, except floating UI. Thank you, floating UI. And all of it, broadly minified, is 16 kilobytes for everything. And you saw, like, you didn't even see it. Like, we got stuff, toasts, everything. Yeah, and all that. So this, okay, that's Flux, 16 kilobytes. But then in your Livewire app, you have Alpine, and all of Alpine's plugins, and Livewire's JavaScript, and all of that still is less than 100 kilobytes for that they have to download once. Like, it just feels so clean. Yeah, so this is what you get with Flux. You get accordion, autocomplete, badge, breadcrumbs, button, card, checkbox, command, context, dropdown, field heading, subheading, text, link, icon, input, page, body, sidebar, header, aside, footer, brand, profile, navbar, nav list, nav menu, modal, radio, select, separator, spacer, switch, table, tabs, text area, and tooltip. That's not a route anymore. That was, now you know the password for artisan down. This is Flux. You can go to Flux right now, fluxui.dev. You can pre-order it. It's $99 per project. That's our early access pricing. I'm going to launch it full 1.0 next week. It's not going to be beta. It's going to be 1.0. You'll be able to put it in your projects, use it in production next week. Go pre-order it. Thank you for watching.
All right.
Oh, dude.
Perfect. Hey, it's almost like we practiced. Okay, so, question. You said you spent 9 months building this.
Should we do a Q&A? Shut up,
Please,
get
no,
off stage.
please don't. We have literally 8 seconds. You said you spent 9 months building this.
Yeah.
How many times did you build a discrete version of this? How many times did you start over?
Oh, yeah. The JavaScript stuff I scrapped Sebastian Dedena knows the journey. It was data attributes forever. It was web components that were styled. It was so many things completely scrapped and rebuilt. Yeah, a lot.
So is that part of why you kept your head down? Because you're like, I'm going to build it, and then I hate it.
Yes.
And I'm going to build it again, and then I hate it. And
Yeah.
you weren't sure you were going to get to a spot that you liked?
I feel like weird, right? Like you're like dragging everybody along, like this is so awesome, and then you feel like you said that, and it's nice to be able to just back out of a bad idea and not tell anyone, and nobody thinks a thing. I don't know. And it's fun to have your head down and then just come up with something. You know?
Well, yeah. Everybody, give it up for Caleb Porzio.